Welcome to the Chamber of Schenectady County's Business Advocacy Council interview with Phil Steck, who is a candidate for the 110th Assembly District. I'm Jack Aernecke, and I'm pleased to be your host today. The Chamber's Business Advocacy Council is a bipartisan and issue-focused organization. Today, we will be talking about issues that affect businesses in Schenectady County and around the Capital Region. Phil, thank you very much for being a part of this program.
Thank you, Jack.
Education, as you know, is extremely important. Businesses in Schenectady County rely on an educated workforce in order to hire the people they need to do things. And yet we have news that just came out a little while ago. TransFinder of Schenectady, which is a high-tech company, is doing a worldwide search for software developers, designers, and software analysts, looking around the world. Perhaps hiring people locally, perhaps not hiring people locally. Is education a priority issue for you, particularly improving the education so that it improves the workforce?
Well, actually, since I've been elected to the Assembly back in 2012, education has been the #1 priority of our office. And I think we've had tremendous accomplishments in that area. For example, the Assembly doubled the funding that the governor had, the increase in funding that the governor had allotted for education in the last budget. That was strictly an Assembly initiative. And in terms of Schenectady, I'm very proud to say that I was an effective advocate for the type of aid that would be most beneficial to Schenectady schools, which is what's called foundation aid. That is the aid that is designed to equalize funding among districts. So education has been a huge priority. Of course, it's not all about funding. Funding is important.
Right.
I'm a strong supporter of the Common Core standards, and at the same time, a very strong opponent of the Common Core testing. I think business needs to have those standards in place so that they know that people will be well qualified for the workforce. But the obsession with test is not a good educational practice, and it's not effective evaluation either, because there's so many complex factors that influence how a group of students behave that it's impossible just to say that some students did better on a test, so therefore their teacher was more effective. So I support the standards. I'm against the testing. The Assembly passed a 2-year moratorium on the testing, which I strongly supported.
How do you measure if the standards are working without the testing?
Well, I think that we've had the same way we do in business. I mean, we don't sit there and give our employees in my business tests to see how they're doing. I think we observe and we evaluate, and we do give some tests. But the idea that we're going to spend, millions and millions and millions of dollars of state money to private testing companies to start with a baseline test in the beginning of school and test them throughout the year to see how they're doing, I think it's wrong. I think it's a waste of money. And frankly, and I think this is very, very important, it gets a little technical, but what we have is what's being used is what's called straight line testing, meaning you have one grade here and one grade at the end. That's a very poor way to measure improvement, because there are many, many factors that go into a student's success, including family background, socioeconomic status. Unless you control for those factors, which you can do actually in very sophisticated social science research, you don't even get a result that's meaningful. So I don't think the straight line testing is very helpful. I think it wastes a tremendous amount of instructional time. And finally, and I made this point to the Commissioner of Education when he visited us in the Assembly, I said, and I had a very successful educational career, and I said, what makes a good student is someone who has a love of learning. Tests destroy the love of learning, and I think this is why I've been a strong opponent of the type of testing that we've had, which has unfortunately been coupled with Common Core. Another point I want to make about Common Core is that the State Education Department no longer provides full-fledged curriculum to the schools. So every school's got to look at the basic principles of the Common Core and develop their own curriculum, and that is extremely difficult for small school districts. It's an inefficient expenditure of resources to be repeating that process over 700 times throughout the state.
You mentioned you had a successful educational career because of your love for learning, and
Correct.
that seems to me, from my observation, almost to be a family encouraged type trait. With so many, particularly with urban schools, with so many broken families, with so many socioeconomic problems, where you have, I think in Schenectady, what is it, 41% of the students do not graduate high school in 4 years. How do you cultivate that love of learning in some areas where there is not a culture for that?
Well, I think it's a difficult task, and I'd certainly commend Superintendent Spring. I think he's a very energetic advocate for the Schenectady schools. But I think it's a combination of a few things. Even with someone who came from a stable family background, like myself, I mean, I can remember the 5th grade because that's when I really, I think, became a good student. And I had a teacher by the name of Mabel M. Moore that I remember. And we did all these reports on foreign countries in the 5th grade. And that got me really interested in it. But I think that this ties right into the chamber. I think that economic development is critical. I think it's no secret that when Schenectady schools were truly among the most outstanding in the nation, Schenectady had an extremely strong economy. People had stable employment, and so I think economic development is paradoxically a key to good education. And so I think a lot of things that are being done in Schenectady to improve the situation with respect to economic development will pay dividends for the education system in the long run. For example, I think the Metroplex program, it doesn't come about by magic. There is dedicated funds that the government is making available to fund that program, and I think that's a very important part of what we should do. I don't think that one of the problems that we have sometimes is everybody just says, cut taxes, cut taxes, cut taxes, and that's going to drive everything forward. It's not that simple, because if we cut taxes all the time, we wouldn't have the money to fund Metroplex and to have that do the job that it's doing. So I think economic development requires government to be a partner with business, to support business, and also I think that to promote economic development, and I think I've been very strong on this as a member of Assembly, is to reduce unnecessary bureaucracy. I have supported the Chamber's bill to eliminate a lot of record keeping that had to do with wages that was artificially imposed because of a problem of wage theft. I mean, paperwork's not the answer to that. I've helped our local businesses deal with state bureaucracy where they were entitled to certain tax credits under law, and then the state bureaucracy came up with rules that nobody knew about when they applied for these tax credits that were jeopardizing the opportunities for those businesses. So I think in answer to your question, to sum up, economic development is actually very important for education.
And also, and I think Superintendent Spring would argue this, fair funding. And he has been arguing for a long time that Schenectady City School District is not getting its fair share of the tax break, where a district in Long Island's getting 110%.
Right, and this is, I think, a critical issue in our state, and it has to do with the difference, and this again gets technical, between gap elimination adjustment and foundation aid. When we had the financial collapse, the state balanced its budget on the backs of the school districts, and the budget gap was reduced through the gap elimination adjustment, which was assessed against the schools. Meanwhile, there was a program called Foundation Aid, which was designed to solve inequities among school districts. That program was no longer there were no longer any increases in funding due to the economic collapse. So this past year, what I successfully advocated for was that we would increase foundation aid for the first time, and that 50% of all education increase would go to foundation aid. Foundation aid is the formula that the state uses to provide equalization across districts. sometimes I think some people get obsessed with this gap elimination adjustment, but that's not really the solution for Schenectady. The solution for Schenectady is foundation aid. But again, I think it's very important. I represent North Colony, South Colony, Niskayuna. When we started with the education funding as proposed by the governor, the two schools that had the biggest budget problems had the least amount of increase. As a result of the work that I did in the assembly, that completely changed, so that the two schools that needed the most increase in funding for different reasons, Schenectady and Niskayuna, ended up getting the most. And I think
Were those one-time things, or
No.
was that a permanent?
Well, Schenectady got some special increases that were not part of the normal budget process to deal with some unique characteristics. But the Niskayuna increase should be permanent and continuing in the absence of some sort of economic downturn.
Okay, I do want to get into another point, and that is the governor has said that the state is very good at telling local governments what they need to do and not providing any money to do it. He was going to propose sweeping mandate relief to relieve the burdens from local government, and yet there doesn't seem to be much of a broom there. There seems to be an awful lot of mandate stuff that local governments have to face that the state requires, and there just isn't any background.
Well, I think that the two main things that need to be done, and I'm kind of disappointed the governor really hasn't supported this. One thing is the state has to take over Medicaid. We're the only state in the United States where the counties pay half the state share of Medicaid. That's done through the property tax. It's very detrimental to our local communities. Secondly, I have my own personal bill, which I worked on with the county of Schenectady, which would allow all our municipalities to join county self-insured health plans. These self-insured health plans are much less expensive for municipalities and help keep our taxes down. But unfortunately, we have a problem with the State Department of Financial Services not supporting self-insured health plans. So I think we got to work very aggressively to bring that about. The Conference of Mayors called that bill the only significant mandate relief bill in the state in the last session, and that was a bill that I authored. So I'm working very aggressively on this. I was a former county legislator, albeit in Albany County, and so mandate relief is very, very important to me based on my experience as a former county official.
And it's important for every property owner.
Absolutely.
Because so much of the property tax goes to mandates.
Yes, absolutely. Medicaid is the largest one. And again, we're unique in the nation in doing it this way. And the problem is, if we're going to have the state take over Medicaid, the state's going to have to figure out what parts of the state bureaucracy it's going to have to reduce to fund that, or how it's going to raise the revenue to do that. But the local property tax is an inefficient and unfair way of funding that program. That is not a local program.
Do local property taxes, the high taxes that property owners face in New York, drive business away?
Well, I think that's true. That's one point where I do agree with the governor on. I think where we differ is on what the methods are to reducing it. I'm not a strong supporter of this program that the governor has now. No one can even figure out how the formula works, and trying to get incentives for local municipalities to reduce their taxes or to keep them low. Look, they have a lot of infrastructure issues that they have to deal with, and I don't think that that's the way to get there. I like the Medicaid relief better.
What about consolidation? There's been a big push by the governor for consolidation of government agencies and operations. There's been some very limited success with that.
Yeah, I think that unless the state's going to step in and say this is how you're going to have to do it, it's not going to happen.
Should the state say that?
I think the state should say that in some limited areas. There are certainly areas of government where services can be shared. Not everybody has to have their own civil service department. Not everybody has to have their own highway department.
Okay, we just a minute left. I'm a business member in Schenectady County. Why should I vote for you?
Well, I think because I've been a very, very hardworking member of Assembly since elected, and a very effective advocate against state bureaucracy on behalf of local business. Whenever problems are called to our attention, we do work on them very hard. We've achieved quite a bit of a success in terms of making sure that the state treats our local businesses fairly.
All right. Thank you, Phil Steck, for taking the time to join me today and to share your thoughts and ideas on issues facing us in Schenectady and the Capital Region. To see interviews with candidates for the New York State 46th and 49th Senate District, 110th, 111th, and 112th State Assembly Districts, and New York's 20th Congressional District, please visit www.schenectadychamber.org. And remember to vote on Election Day, Tuesday, November 4th.